Hey there, how there, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Stone Cold Hockey tournament. We're doing the 83-84 tournament with all 21 teams involved. There are 10 teams that will have to go through a preliminary round and then a best of three, and then those 5 teams will join the other 11 teams that didn't have to separate into a best of 5 round of 16, and then it'll be best of 7 either way. So let's go first to Pittsburgh, Philly. They've made the Battle of Pennsylvania matchup, and Philly beats Pittsburgh 5-2 in Pittsburgh as Bob Rose beats Danny Herron. Philly goes by one of the setters. I think that was Reg. Mark Howe, Brian Prop, Bill Barber, Kitchener. Didn't know he was still playing. And Daryl Sittler. Yeah, that guy. Rob Busquets and Pat Boutet for Pittsburgh. Now, of course, the 84 Penguins known for their tanking to get Mario Lemieux. Anyway, Philly up 5-2, game 1. St. Louis, Winnipeg. St. Louis won 6-5 as Mike Liu, Brian Hayward. Winnipeg goes by Thomas Steen, Scott Arniel again, Paul McLean, yep, the former coach. St. Louis goes by Perry Turnbull, Rob Ramage, Brian Sutter, Bernie Federko, Sutter again, and Ramage again. Rob Ramage, known for being Leafs captain and also a murderer. Others Quebec. Others surprised that they had to go to the preliminary round. They lost 5-2 at home to Quebec. Mario Gosselin beats Rolling Mallison. Islander goes by Thomas Janssen and Butch Goring. Quebec goes by Michel Goulet, Alan Cote, Tony McKegney, Anton Stachny, and then Goulet again. New Jersey, Toronto. Toronto won 5-4 in New Jersey as Dowie beat Chico Resch. These were up 3-0. Well, Jim Corn, Rick 5, Dan Dowst, Peter Inashak, and John Anderson scored for Toronto. Devils goals by Aaron Broden, Pat Verbeek, Rick Mahar, and Greg McAdam. And finally, Boston, LA. LA wins 4-3 in Boston as Marcus Matson beats Pete Peters. Boston goals by Dave Silk, former member of the American Ice Team, Tom Fergus, and Terry O'Reilly. Taz still around. LA goes by Brian McClellan, Dave Taylor, Jim Fox, and Brittany Nichols. In game 2s, St. Louis wins 6-2. They're going to the round of 16. Hines beats Brian Hayward. Winnipeg goes by Doug Smale and Paul McLean. But anyway, St. Louis goes by Perry Anderson, Wayne Babbage, Mark Reeds, Doug Wickenheiser, Bernie Federko, and Brian Sutter. Quebec 1-0 over the Islanders as Dan Bouchard beats Billy Smith. Third period, Michel Goulet from Louis Slager and Randy Moeller as the Islanders, surprisingly, are 1 and done. The Nordiques will go to the Sweet 16. I didn't expect that. Leafs couldn't do it at home. Ken Reagan losing to Ron Lowe as the Devils will go back home. Leaf goes by Rick 5, Miro Freiser, and Dale McCourt. Devils goes by Tom Higgins, Phil Russell, Mark Brumwell, Bobby McMillan, Mal Bridgman, and Aaron Broden. So the Leafs look like they're in trouble. LA beat Boston 6-3 on home turf as Blake beats Pete Peters and the Bruins are gone. Kings win. Bruins goals by Mark Gillis, Miles McConnell, and Ray Bork. But the Kings goals by Mark Hardy, Bernie Nichols, Dave Taylor, Brian Engblom, Marcel Dion, and Bernie Nichols again. Meanwhile, Philly beat Pittsburgh, the sweep. Rose beat Danny Herron. Taylor scored for Pittsburgh, but Ron Sutter, Silo Salo, Ray Allison, and Brian Prop were the heroes for the Flyers. So we know the Flyers, Blues, Nordiques, and Kings are in to the Sweet 16 through the preliminary round. New Jersey or Toronto. It is the Leafs. Palmetier beats Ron Lowe. Leafs win. Yay. Devil goes by Billy Lorimer, Jan Ludwig twice. Leaf goes by John Anderson, Greg Terrian, Rick 5, John Anderson with the hat trick, and Walt Pundaby. So the Leafs move on to the Sweet 16. The Leafs will get Minnesota. Edmonton and Vancouver will face each other. Montreal will face Chicago. Quebec will face the Rangers. Detroit will face St. Louis. Washington, Calgary, Hartford, Buffalo, and Los Angeles, Philly. So 2 of the teams in the preliminary rounds have to face each other. First game, Leafs taking on Minnesota. And the Leafs at home lost 8-5 to the North Stars. Milosh beats Palmetier. 13 goals in this game. Toronto goals by Dale McCourt, Russ Courtnall, Rick Five, Peter Hanchek, and John Anderson. But the North Stars got 8. Steve Payne, Tom McCarthy, Dino Ciccarelli, Neil Broden, Levy, Al McAdam, Brad Maxwell, and then Ciccarelli scored the second time. Minnesota had 7 different goal scorers. Game 1 of Edmonton, Vancouver. Oilers win 7-3. Fuhrer beats King Richard Brodeur. Canuck goals by Tony Tanti, Peter Sundstrom, and Darcy Rhoda. The Oilers, Willie Lindstrom, Yaro Posar, Yari Curry, Dave Semenko, Wayne Gretzky, Kevin Lowe, and then Mark Messier. So 7 different Oilers scoring goals. Gretzky got 3 assists. I know everyone wants to see how many Gretzky. So Gretzky got a goal and 3 assists against the Canucks. Chicago went into Montreal, won in overtime. Esposito beats Richard Severine. Tony Esposito still around. Chicago, Bob Murray, Elsie Cord, Denny Sear, Bob Murray again, and Steve Larmer scoring. Montreal in regulation, Bobby Smith, Guy Lafleur when he was decent. Bob Gainey. Gainey with a hat trick. But at 3:53 with Carbonneau in the box for hooking, Denny Sear scored from Laziak and Jeff Larmer. Kitchener. Steve Larmer did not play for Kitchener, but Jeff Larmer did. Quebec and the Rangers. Rangers go to Quebec and win 3-2 as Steve Weeks beats Danny Bouchard. Ranger goals by Mark Pavlich, Raijo Russalainen, and Pierre LaRouche. Quebec goals by Michel Goulet and Will Paymont. Detroit St. Louis, Game 1. So Detroit win 5-4 as Patrick Stefan beat Bunny LaRock. That is Bunny LaRock. After that pause, Detroit beat St. Louis 5-4. Anyway, Washington beat Calgary 3-1. Pat Reagan beat Don Edwards. Kitchener. Calgary goal by Paul Reinhardt. Also Kitchener Ranger from Quinn and Riseborough. Oh, Riseborough's a Kitchener Ranger too. Bobby Gould and Craig Laughlin scoring the goals. Laughlin with 2 of them. Montreal made that trade, sending Laughlin and Langway to Washington. Hartford Prolongation over Buffalo as Greg Millen beats Bob Sauvé. Sylvain Turgeon scored in regulation from Danny Neufeld. Phil Housley in the second period from Mike Foligno, but Mark Johnson at 2:19 from DuPont and Neufeld. LA Philly. Philly crushing LA in Divine Powder 9-4. Froze beats Mario Lassard. 5 goals in the first period by Philly. Sinisalo, Barber, Kitchener, Dave Poulin, Brian Propp, and Daryl Sittler. Kings had 1 with Charlie Simmer, but then Philly scored 4 in the last 2 periods. Ron Sutter, Brian Propp. Oh, one of the Sutters. Rich and Ron both were on that team. And Mark Howell. Okay. Kings, Charlie Simmer, Marcel Dion, Jim Fox, and Marcel Dion. So 2 goals for Dion. Anyway, the second day, Edmonton, Vancouver. Edmonton won 7-5 as Moog beat John Garrett. Vancouver goes by Thomas Grandin, Rick Lance, Darcy Rhoda, and Rick Lance. Edmonton, Paul Coffey, Kitchener with the goal. Wayne Gretzky, of course. Yuri Curry, Wayne Gretzky. Paul Coffey, again. Curry, and Glenn Anderson. So 2 goals by Kitchener's Paul Coffey. Montreal, Chicago, Game 2 saw Chicago win again as Esposito beats Penny. Chicago goes by Keith Brown, Daryl Sutter, Billy Gardner, Jeff Larmer, Kitchener, and Danny Sear. Montreal goes by Bobby Smith, Alfie Turcotte, and Stevie Shutt. Rangers beat Quebec in Quebec 5-2 as Steve Weeks beats Gosselin. Ranger goals by Barry Beck, Patrick Sundstrom, Dave Maloney, Patrick Sundstrom, and Don Maloney. One of them. Dave and Don Maloney. Yeesh, I hate those. When 2 D Maloneys are there. Tony McKegney and Will Paymont for Quebec. Well, one of the Maloneys was Kitchener. Detroit, St. Louis. Detroit won 5-3 to take a 2-0 lead. Eddie Neal beats Mike Liut. St. Louis goals by Brian Sutter, Joey Mullen. Yeah, he played for the Blues. And Doug Gilmore. Yeah, he was a Blue. Red Wing goals by Steve Yzerman, Kelly Kissio, Dwight Foster, Kitchener, Reed Larson, and Ron Duguay. Yeah, people forget Duguay was a Red Wing at that time. Washington, Calgary. Washington wins 6-1. Reagan beats Lemelin. Only Calgary goal was by Steve Tambellini. Washington goes by Craig Laughlin, Gaetan Duchesne, Bobby Gold, Mike Gardner, Craig Laughlin. Man, Laughlin's on fire. 5 goals in 2 games. Hartford, Buffalo. And for a change, we have a tie. Buffalo beat Hartford, Sauve beat Millen, so it's 1-1 in this series. Buffalo goes by Mike Ramsey, Jerry Korab, Gilbert Perreault, Greg Hamel, Rod Sealing, Kitchener, Hamel, and Steve McKenna. Hartford goes by Siltonen, Ray Neufeld, Mark Johnson, and Ray Neufeld. And Toronto, Minnesota game 2 saw Minnesota crush Toronto in the fine powder. Maloche beats Palmetier. Another 8 goals for Minnesota. Toronto's 3 goals. Bill Stewart, Rick 5, and Tony Martin? T. Martin? Anyway, Minnesota, Mark Napier. Didn't know he played for the Northstars. Brian Maxwell, Dino Cizzarelli, Maxwell, Brian Bellows. There's Kitchener. Dino Cizzarelli, and Neil Brodin. So Cizzarelli put up a hat trick. So I skipped one. Philly beat LA 7-1 as Froze beat Barron. The Baron. LA Taylor from Ruskoski. Philly goes by Daryl Sidler. Sidler had a hat trick. Nice. To 5 goals. Mark Howell, Tim Kerr, Ron Sutter, and Doug Crossman. So 7-1 Flyers. The Flyers. Here's the Flyers. So every series except for Hartford Buffalo are at 2-0. Anyway, Montreal-Chicago game 3, and Montreal fights the sweep. Sevigny was in that against Esposito. Chicago only got 2 goals, Denny Savard and Feimster. Montreal goes Pierre Mondu, Chris Nyland, Guy Carbonneau, Guy Lafleur, Bobby Smith, and Dougie Wickenheiser. Strange about Wickenheiser because, he's the guy Montreal took over Denny Savard for the #1 pick. Third game, Quebec Rangers, and the Rangers crushed Quebec. Steve Weeks beats Mario Goslin, and the Rangers sweep Quebec aside and go to the quarterfinals. 1 goal, Paul Gillis. Ranger goal, Patrick Sundstrom, his 3rd. Anders Hedberg scoring his 1st. Sundstrom, Maloney, Kitchener, Mark Osborne, Mark Rogers, Ristolainen, and Anders Hedberg. So Hedberg with 2 goals. The Rangers crushed Quebec and will move to the quarterfinals. Detroit will go to the quarterfinals, 6-2. Stefan beats Hines. St. Louis goes by Federico and Jorgen Pedersen. Detroit goes by Claude Loisel, Dwight Foster, Kitchener, Lane Lambert, Steve Yzerman, Eddie Johnstone, and Rennie Ladesseur. So Detroit will move on. Calgary with the overtime win. Reggie Lemelin beats Pat Reagan, so they will avoid elimination for now. Washington, Bobby Carpenter had a hat trick in the first period. Shand and Craig Valentine with goals in the 3rd period. Calgary goes by Eddie Beers, Kerry Olatra, Laney McDonald, Steve Tambellini, and Eddie Beers. And Colin Patterson scored for Calgary. In overtime, on the power play, Gardner was in the box from Dan Quinn and Mike Eves. Buffalo beat Hartford 6-4. So they're at 2-1. Sauve beats Millen. Buffalo goals by Rael Cloutier, John Tucker, Dave Anderchuk, Phil Housley, Jill Perreault, still around, and John Tucker. Hartford goes Curry, Sylvain Turgeon, Riedel, Siltonen, and Bobby Crawford. Game 3 between LA and Philly will sweep the Kings. Froze beats Blake. LA got a goal by Ken Houston, but Philly goes Bill Barber, Kitchener, Greg Cochran, Tim Kerr, and Igor Silasalo. And Minnesota sweeps Toronto 7-2. Beaupre beats Rick St. Croix. Dale McCourt, Greg Terrian were the only goals for Toronto. Minnesota goals Willie Plett, Neil Brodin, Tom McCarthy, Brad Maxwell, Brian Bellows, Kitchener. Tom McCarthy and Bellows again. So 2 goals from the former Kitchener Ranger. And the last game 3, Vancouver avoids elimination 2-0 over Edmonton. Richard Brodeur shuts out Gretzky, Curry, and Messier. Michel Petit and Patrick Sundstrom were the only goal scorers, but Edmonton got shut out. Wow. So 4 series are done. Minnesota, Philly, Rangers, Detroit. 4 will not. Game 4s. Montreal crushes Chicago 9-3 as Rick Wamsley takes down Tony Esposito. So Montreal, Chicago, Denny Savard, Billy Gardner, and Ken Yaremchuk scoring goals. Montreal goals by Perry Turnbull, Elfie Turcotte, Mario Tremblay, Guy Lafleur, Craig Woodwick, Bob Gainey, and Guy Carbonneau. So Montreal is forced to game 5 back home. Maybe they might do it. Washington and Calgary Sting 5-2. Pat Reagan beats Reggie Lemelin. They were up 5-0. Calgary got goals by Paul Reinhardt, Kitchener, and Lenny McDonald. Washington goals Doug Jarvis, Gaetan Duchesne, Scott Stevens, Kitchener, Dave Christian, and Bobby Gold. Hartford Buffalo. Buffalo ends the series. Barrasso in that against Stankowski. So both teams with different goalies. Buffalo, Steve McKenna, Honey Furta, and Dave Anderchuk. Hartford goals by Richie Dudd and Ronnie Francis, but not enough. And finally, Vancouver will force a game 5 in Edmonton, 8-3 as Brodeur beat Andy Moog. Rick Chartrand, Randy Gregg, and Wayne Gretzky scoring goals, but man, Vancouver put up 8 on Moog. Greg Lupul, Cam Neely, yeah, he was a Canuck, remember. Tony Tanti, Lupul, Thomas Gradine, Lupul with the hat trick, Thomas Gradine with his second, and Cam Neely. So Neely with 2 goals in that game. So we have 2 game 5s. Minnesota, Philly, Buffalo, Washington, Detroit, and Rangers are all in. Game 5s. And Chicago wins in Montreal. Murray Bannerman beats Sevigny and ruins Montreal's chances to come back from 2-0 down. John Chabot and Guy Carbonneau scored. How's we're looking good at 2-0, but then Keith Brown, Danny Savard, Keith Brown, Gardner, and Doug Wilson scored, and the Blackhawks will go to the quarterfinals, not Montreal. And this is the first time in the tournament. I've done 4 previous tournaments. This is the first time Montreal's not even in the final 4. Much less, they didn't even make the quarterfinals. And finally, Edmonton wins 7-2. Mo beats Garrett. Vancouver did score Mo LeMay and Rick Lance, but those were late. Edmonton goals by Mark Messier, Paul Coffey, Glenn Anderson, Ken Linsman, Pat Hughes, Glenn Anderson, and Wayne Gretzky. So, Coffey. Oh, yeah, Kitchener. Forgot to say Kitchener. So, we're going to the quarterfinals, best of 7. Philly will play Chicago, Washington Rangers, Edmonton Buffalo, and Detroit Minnesota. Game 1. Philly crushes Chicago 6-0. Bob Froese with the shutout. Philly goals Dave Poulin, Brian Propp, Tim Kerr, Brian Propp. So Poulin, Propp, and Kerr all scored 2 goals in that game. 3 multi-goal scorers. Nice. Rangers Washington. Washington strikes first. Len Hanlon losing to Al Jansen. Ranger goals by Mark Pavlich and Dave Maloney. Washington goals by Brian Erickson, Perry Anderson, and Dave Christian. Edmonton Buffalo shocks Edmonton in Edmonton 6-3. Barrasso beats Moog. Edmonton was up 3-1 after 1 period. Glenn Anderson, Charlie Huddy, and Kevin McClelland with the goals. Lenny Ruff, yes, that guy, scored for Buffalo. Then Hamel in the second. By the 3rd period, Dave Anderchuk, Jill Perreault, Jim Weimer, and Rod Sealing. Kitchener scoring for the Sabres. Detroit, Minnesota. Detroit strikes first 4-2. Corrado Mikalev with the win over Don Bilberry. Minnesota was up 2-0. Steve Payne and Mark Napier scored, but Detroit scored Lane Lambert, Blake Dunlop, Ron Duguay, and Ivan Boldariev. So anyway, game 2s. Rangers win in overtime to tie the series. Hanlon beats Jansen. Ranger goals in regulation. Mark Osborne, Pierre LaRouche, Patrick Sundstrom, Mike Rogers, and Andres Hensberg. Washington goals Brian Erickson, Alan Hallworth, he's known as a fighter. Bank Gustafson, Larry Murphy. No, he was not a Kitchener Ranger, despite what people think. And Dave Christian. But Nick Fitu, of all people, with the winning goal from Hedberg and Maloney. Edmonton Buffalo. Buffalo in overtime. They're 2-0 on Edmonton. Barrasso beat Fuhrer. Man, that's huge. Buffalo goals Dave Vandercheck, Phil Housley, and Chill Perot in regulation. Wayne Gretzky with 2 goals, Glenn Anderson with 1. But in overtime, 32 seconds. Rod Sealing, Kitchener from Mike Foligno and Lindruff. Minnesota beat Detroit 4-3, so that series is tied at Unos. Malosh beat McAuliffe. Tom McCarthy, Brian Bellows, Kitchener. Oh, Brian Bellows, Kitchener, Kitchener times 3. Bellows with the hat trick. Detroit goes by Ivan Bodriev, Steve Yzerman, and Ron Duguay. Flyers beat the Blackhawks 4-0. Another shutout by Froze. Back-to-back shutouts. I think I've never seen that before. Kerr, Sinisalo, Sidler, and then Sinisalo again scoring. Flyers looking good. Wow, back-to-back shutouts. That's unprecedented. Anyway, Game 3, Edmonton-Buffalo starts off, and Buffalo is now 3-0 on Edmonton. Sauve beats Moog. How the heck is Edmonton one win away from being one loss away already? Buffalo goals, Jim Weimer, Verta, Mark Foligno, Steve McKenna, Paul Cyr. Edmonton goals, Kevin McClelland, Ken Linsman, Paul Coffey, Kitchener, Jim Playfair, and Glenn Anderson. Gretzky was held to just 1 assist. If you hold Gretzky, you're going to be okay. Detroit beats Minnesota 4-2 to take the lead in the series, and Neal beats Chills Malosh. Detroit was up 4-0. Steve Yzerman with 2 goals, Ivan Bodriev and John Agronek with the other goals. Minnesota, Craig Hartsburg and Al McAdam. Game 3s. Chicago scored a goal and won the game 4-2. Bannerman beats Froze. It took till the 14-minute mark of the first period. Daryl Sutter scored, so that was 134 minutes in the series. Chicago did without scoring a goal, but they did it. Sutter scored again, and then Gardner and Yanelchuk. Philly goals by Mark Howell and Brian Perrup. Rangers beat Washington 6-0. Shutout. Big win for Glenn Hanlon over Patty Regan. Mark Eisborn, Barry Beck, Patrick Sundstrom, Mike Allison, Nick Fatiu, again, and Mark Pavlich scoring for the Rangers. Wow, unbelievable. And then, yeah, so there are Buffalo's the only team that can sweep their opponents. The other series are 2-1. Detroit, Minnesota, Game 4 sees Minnesota win and split at 2. Bull Parade beats Mio. Detroit goes by Reed Larson, Kelly Kissio, Ivan Bodriev, and Ronnie Duguay. Minnesota goes by Gordy Roberts, Tito Cicerelli, Dennis Maruk, Willie Plett, Craig Levy, and Tom McCarvey. Other Game 4s, Philly beat Chicago 3-2. They're up 3-1. Froze beats Bannerman. Philly goes by Tim Kerr, Mark Howard, Igor Silsalo. Chicago goes by Bob Murray and Danny Savard. Washington Rangers Game 4 saw the Rangers win in overtime. Hanlon beats Jansen, so the Rangers are 1 win away from the semis. Mike Gardner scored a hat trick in the regulation. Rangers, Mike Allison, Mark Blaisdell, and Pierre LaRouche. But in overtime at 4:23, Ron Greschner, defenseman, scored from Hedberg and back. And the Rangers are now 1 win away. Meanwhile, Edmonton remembered who they were and crushed Buffalo 7-2. Moog beat Sauve. Buffalo got Hamel and Gilles Perreault with goals. Edmonton, 7 goals. Wayne Gretzky, Randy Gregg, Dave Lumley, Kevin McClellan, Paul Coffey, Kitchener, Gary Curry, and Glenn Anderson. So, yeah. So, 3 series at 3-1 and 1 series at 2s. Philly, Chicago. Did Philly? Yes, they did. 4-1. Helly Lindbergh was in that this time against Murray Bannerman. Chicago got to go Jeff Larmer, his second. Kitchener. Philly goes by Rich Sutter, Tim Erickson, Brian Propp with 2 goals, so he's at 9. Washington Rangers. Not over yet. Washington wins at home. Reagan beats Hamlin. So, Rangers' only goal was Pierre LaRouche's 4th. Larry Murphy, Bob Carpenter, Craig Valentine, Scott Stevens, Kitchener, and Mike Gardner with the goals. Buffalo, Edmonton. Edmonton wins, albeit in overtime. Fuhrer beat Barrasso. Edmonton actually was. Edmonton was down 5-0. Really? Phil Housley, Dave Vanderchuck, John Tucker, Real Kluche, and Phil Housley scored. It was 5-0. Wow. And then Paul Coffey, Kitchener, scored from Curry. Pat Conacher from Gretzky and Hunter. Wayne Gretzky, his 9th of the postseason from Curry and Gregg. Then Pat Conacher, his 2nd goal from Linsman and Curry. And then at 45 seconds left with the net empty, Glenn Anderson, his 8th from Hughes and Linsman. And Kevin McClellan in overtime at 3:24 on the power play after Housley went off for high sticking. Gretzky with the assist. Unbelievable. Buffalo was up 5-0 and they choked it. Anyway, game 5. Minnesota will not go away. They win 6-5 over Detroit. Belosh beats Greg Stephan. Detroit goes by Ivan Boldrev, Eddie Johnstone, Boldrev, Lane Libert, and Johnstone. Minnesota goals by Al McAdam, Dennis Maruk, Craig Hertzberg, Tom McCarthy, Neil Broden, and Neil Broden. Right, on to game 6. On game 6s, and the Rangers win in overtime, so guess what? They're going to the semis. Steve Weeks beats Al Jansen. In regulation, Washington had Craig Laughlin, Brian Erickson, Dave Christian, Bobby Gould, and Dave Shan scoring. Ranger goals, Pierre LaRouche scoring, and then again, Sundstrom, Mark Pavlich, and Willie Huber, his first of the postseason. But in overtime at 4:42, Ruotsalainen from Beck and Maloney, and the Rangers send Washington home and will make the semifinals alongside Philadelphia. And it's Buffalo who will go, and Edmonton's out. Buffalo stops the series in 6 on home turf. Edmonton goes Glenn Anderson, Paul Coffey, Kitchener, Glenn Anderson, and Paul Coffey. So Anderson with 2, Coffey with 2. In regulation, Buffalo had goals by Gilles Perreault, Larry Playfair, Gilles Perreault, and Dave Vanderchuck. But in overtime at 11:06, because Pusar got in trouble, Paul Sear from Rod Seeley and Kitchener, and Verta. So Paul Sear puts the Sabres in the semifinals somehow. It's going to be an All-American semifinal. Minnesota won 4-1. Beaupre beat McAuliffe. Detroit got Ruan Duguay scoring, but Minnesota 4 goals. Tom McCarthy, Dennis Maruk, Al McAdam, and Brian Lawden, that high school guy. So we have a final 4 of Philly versus Buffalo and Rangers versus Minnesota. So this could be huge. Anyway, game 1. Yeah, okay. Game 1. Buffalo beat Philly 7-6. Sauve beat Lindbergh. Wow. Big one. Philly goals. Tim Kerr, Len Hatchborn, who was actually a Brantford minor hockey teammate of Wayne Gretzky, if you must know. Tim Kerr, Bill Barber, Kitchener, and Hatchborn again, and then Daryl Sittler, his 7th. Buffalo goals, Lindy Ruff, that guy, Jules Hamel, Tim Kerr, what am I thinking? Gilles Perreault, Peterson for Buffalo, Hamel, Steve McKenna, and Mike Foligno with the winning goal. Over on the other side, the Westerns, Rangers win 5-4 over Minnesota. Beaupre losing to Hanlon. Minnesota goes by Steve Payne, Dino Ciccarelli, and Paul Holmgren. Yep, that Paul Holmgren. Ranger goals by Mark Osborne, Patrick Sundstrom, Osborne again, Mark Pavlich, and Osborne. So Mark Osborne with a hat trick. Super Mark Osborne. Game 2, Rangers Minnesota. So Minnesota get their own back 4-3. Beaupre beats Van Beesbrook. So the Rangers went with Van Beesbrook in net. It was 1-1 after 1 period. Pavlich for New York, McAdam for Minnesota. But then Rangers made it 3-1. Sundstrom and Hedberg scored. It was good. But Minnesota scored 3 goals late. Dave Richter, I guess that's his name. Brian Bellows, Kitchener, with 2 goals to make it 8 for him. The other game 2 saw Buffalo go into Philly and win 5-2. Barrasso beats Froze. Philly goals by Brian Propp, his 10th. Hatchborn, his 3rd. But Buffalo goals by Mike Foligno, Dave Vanderchuck, Phil Housley, Larry Playfair, and Mike Foligno. So Buffalo up 2-0. Game 3 saw Philly get their own back in Buffalo. Froze beats Brazo in overtime. Buffalo goals in regulation. John Tucker, Hamel, Jules Hamel, and Dave Vanderchuck. Philly goals by Tim Erickson, Daryl Sittler, and Igor Silasalo. And then Silasalo with the winning goal in overtime from Clark and Prop. Bobby Clark getting the assist, but not getting the goals. Anyway, Philly forces the issue. Meanwhile, Minnesota's now up 2-1 in their series, 5-4. Beaupre beats Weeks. Minnesota goals by Tom McCarthy, Neil Broaden, Brian Bellows, Kitchener, Brian Lawton, and Brian Maxwell. Ranger goals by Mark Blistel, Pierre LaRouche, Anders Hedberg, and Mike Rogers. The Rangers looked good, but they choked. Anyway, time for Game 4s. And Minnesota wins 5-2 as Beaupre took down Hanlon. Ranger goals by Anders Hedberg and Patrick Sundstrom. By Brad Maxwell, goal, another goal. Dino Ciccarelli, Lily Platt, and Brian Lawton finally coming to life for Minnesota. The other Game 4 saw Buffalo win on home turf 4-1. Barrasso beats Lindbergh. Tim Kerr scored for Philly, but Paul Sear, Gilles Perreault, Dave Anderchuk, and Mike Foligno for the Sabres. Well, I mean, hey, if you beat Edmonton, you can beat anybody. Is Buffalo in the final? The answer is yes, they are. 5-3 over Philly. Barrasso beats Froze, so Buffalo is on their way to the final. Unbelievable. Well, they won the 75 tournament. Anyway, Foligno, Housley, McKenna, Housley, and Seeley, Kitchener. With the goals for the Sabres. Flyers goals by Poulin, Sittler, and Sittler again. Daryl Sittler, 10 goals, but it's not going to be enough. Minnesota Rangers. And Minnesota wins in 5 games, 6-2. Beaupre beats Weeks. And it will be Philly who will be the third place team in 84, not the Rangers. I think Philly did better than the Rangers in the points thing. I know they both went out in 5, but I don't think the 84 Rangers were just as good as the 84 Flyers. So the Flyers will get in somehow. Ranger goals by Mark Pavlich and Steve Richmond, I guess that's his name. Minnesota goals by Brian Lawton, Dino Ciccarelli, Brian Lawton again, Brad Maxwell, Steve Payne. So, Buffalo and Minnesota are in the final. Buffalo, well, Barrasso 6-2, Sauvé 5-2, so both decent goalies. Barrasso has a 2.79 goals against. Sauvé has a 4.28 goals against average, but yet they're still good. Well, Buffalo went through the last 16, took care of Hartford in 4 games, then took care of Edmonton and Philly. I mean, come on, if you can beat those teams, you can beat anybody. And Minnesota, Beaupre and Milosh. Beaupre 7-2, Milosh 4-1. Beaupre at 2.98 goals against average. Minnesota swept Toronto in the Sweet 16. Took care of Detroit in 6 in the quarters, and then the semis they took care of the Rangers. Oh yeah, I forgot to. So Minnesota, Brad Maxwell with 28 points. Tom McCarthy with 20. Neil Broaden with 17. So Maxwell's got 19 assists, so he likes to pass the buck. Ciccarelli with 10 goals. Kitchener's Brian Bellows and Maxwell with 9 goals each. Paul Holmgren, Dave Richter, and Gordy Roberts with just 1. Back to Buffalo for the points. Gilles Perreault and Phil Housley. Gilles Perreault still producing at his age. 21 points. Mike Foligno with 17. Dave Anderchuk and Gilbert Perreault with 9 goals each. Housley with 8. Mike Ramsey, Brett Peterson, and Jerry Korab with 1. Jim Weimer. Did I have trouble? Sean McKenna. Yeah, I did say Sean McKenna and Shields Hamel. I was right. Assists, Housley leads. Alright. Sabres, North Stars. Who's going to win game 1? It will be Buffalo 6-2. Sauvé took down Milosh. Minnesota goes by Alan McAdam and Steve Payne. They were up 2-0, but they gave up 6 straight. Real Cloutier with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 goals. And Lindy Ruff. Unbelievable. Real Cloutier had 2 goals in the 3 playoff rounds. And yet, in this round, he scores 5 goals. More than doubles his output. What the heck? Game 2 saw Buffalo do the same thing, 8-3 as Barrasso took down Milosh. Minnesota goes by Willie Platt, Tom McCarthy, and Stevie Payne. But Buffalo Did it. Steve McKenna, Phil Housley, McKenna again, Chills Hamel, Phil Housley, Dave Anderchuk, and Paul Sear. And Dave Anderchuk again. Housley with 10 goals as a defenseman. I rarely see that. So Buffalo's halfway home. In Game 3, Minnesota came back fighting, winning 5-4. Miloš beat Barrasso. Buffalo goes Shil Perreault, Lindy Ruff, Rio Kluche scores again, and Mickey Reno made it 4 goals for Buffalo. In regulation, Minnesota, Tom McCarthy, Dino Ciccarelli, Craig Levy, and Brian Bellows. Kitchener. But at overtime, at 3:37, Tom McCarthy from Kurt Giles makes it 5-4 Minnesota. Game 4. Series Buffalo win on the road 6-4. Sauve beats Beaupre, and Buffalo looks like they're going to win this series. Randomization. Minnesota was up 4-2. Brad Maxwell, Dennis Baruch, Steve Payne with 2 goals. It looked good. Buffalo had Gilbert Perreault and Mike Foligno. Gilles Hamel scored to make it 4-3 for Buffalo. But then Anderchuk, Sear, and McKenna scoring for the Sabres in the third period, 6-4. Looks like we have an ending. Or not. Minnesota goes to Buffalo, wins 5-3. Miloš beats Barrasso. Sear, Housley, and Kluche for Buffalo. 7th goal for Kluche in the finals. Minnesota wins. Steve Payne, Al McAdam, Neil Broden, Steve Payne again, and Willie Plett doing his job. Game 6. We're not done. Minnesota wins 6-4. Beaupre beats Barrasso. Minnesota's forcing the issue against Buffalo. Buffalo was up 3-0. Rio Kluche again, big guy. Verta and Lindy Ruff. But Minnesota scored 3 straight goals. Ciccarelli, Platt, and McCallum. But then Buffalo made it 4-3 on Verta's goal. But Minnesota scored 3 goals late. Marouk, Lawton, and McCarthy. So we got a Game 7 in the final, which we are going to play. Why not? Minnesota Buffalo, it is Barrasso versus Miloš. Yeah, surprised they didn't touch John Casey or Jim Craig from the North Stars. North Stars have Brian Bellows, Kitchener, Tom McCarthy, Dino Ciccarelli, Neil Broden, Steve Payne, Al McAdam, Brad Maxwell, Dennis Baruch, Keith Acton, Willie Plett, Mark Napier, Brian Lawton, Gordy Roberts, Brad Ashton, Craig Hartsburg, Kurt Giles, Craig Levy, George Ferguson, Lars Lindgren, Dan Mendet, Paul Holmgren, Dave Richter, and Tom Hirsch. The Sabres have Dave Anderchuk, Mike Foligno, Jill Perot, Phil Housley, Riel Kluche, Gilles Hamel, Sean McKenna, Paul Sear, Lindy Ruff, that guy, Rick Sealing, Kitchener, John Tucker, Mike Ramsey, Craig Ramsey, with an A, why? Brad Peterson, Hanu Ferda, Jim Weaver, Larry Playfair, Mike Bowler, Bill Height, Jerry Korab still around, Claude Ferret, Adam Creighton, Steve Patrick, Mark Bruno, and David Fenise. First period, 4 minutes into the game, both teams deliver a hit. 3 minutes later, aggression, leads good penalty for Minnesota. Richter in the box for 2 minutes. Can the Sabres connect? Yes, they do. Anderchuk is 13th from Foligno and Gorka. 1-0 Sabres. Sabres won 48 games that year. Pretty good. Minnesota 39. 3 minutes later, Minnesota retaliation. Roberts in the box. Not good. Buffalo, Jim Weaver? No. Another chance? Sear? No. 2 minutes later. Mosquito! Leap in the air, Mike Foligno. His 8th from Weaver and Height. 2-0 Sabres. Well, if you can beat Edmonton and Philadelphia in the same tournament, you deserve to win this game. 2 minutes later. Aggression? And the Sabres go to the box. Riel Kluche for 2 minutes. The guy who scored 8 goals in the finals. Minnesota, Tom McCarthy? No. Second chance? Brian Bellows? No. And Buffalo looking good, up 2-0. Trying to send 2 teams into the tournament as winners. That would be pretty huge, don't you think? And yes, regulation and all that does, like how you do in real life, does determine the seeding. And there will be seeding. 3 games left, 3 minutes, and we have a fight. Roberts and Ruff are fighting. That's a joke. That's the absolute definition of a joke. And Gordy Roberts. Good news for Buffalo is they took out a defenseman. But after the fight happened, Riel Kluche could not score. He tried. 4 minutes later. Sean McKenna missed. Gordy Roberts, chance. No, he cannot. No fight. Final moments of the period. A chance for Broaden. Ah, he missed. Broaden had a chance. But Buffalo still holding on. 2-0. Tom Barrassow's trying to get that key win. 3 minutes into the third period. Sabres a chance to ice it. Gilles Perreault. Not yet. 5 minutes later. Score! Andrew Jack, his 14th. Sean McKenna with an assist. How many goals did Sean McKenna score? Dude scored, what, 8 goals and he finally gets an assist? That doesn't make sense. Andrew Chuck, 14 goals. So Andrew Chuck, he's just lethal. There's a couple of hits, but they are running out of time. And Real Kuche, his 9th. Finals from Paul Sear. Real Kluche woke up 9 goals, including 5 in the first game and 4 in the next 5. Unbelievable. Real Kluche, what the heck? Where was this? Score! With 2 seconds left, Brian Lawton scores from Giles and Maxwell. 23 assists by Brad Maxwell. Wow. But in the end, the Sabres do win the game 4-1. Barrasso 2 seconds away from a shutout. That is just the weirdest timing I've ever seen of a final of a goal to break up a shutout. But it didn't happen. The Sabres are your champions, winning in 7 games. Barrasso 8-5, Sauvé 7-2. But yeah, Sabres took care of the Whalers, Oilers, Flyers, and North Stars to get this far. Gilbert Pro 29 points, Phil Housley 26, Andrew Check 25. Lots of people with points. Sean McKenna had 8 goals, and then he finally gets an assist. That does not make sense. It doesn't have to make sense. But yeah, the Sabres, kachi! So the Sabres won the 75 tournament, and then they win the 84 tournament. Well, if you beat Edmonton, you can do anything. And Gretzky will not be happy. No, he won't. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond Ado.